The Superintendent of Highways, New York State ACT legislation, I'm sure we'll explain what that acronym is. Its effects on equipment purchasing for Webster and potential equipment purchasing amendments to implement. Back to you, Pat.
Yeah, kind of keeping a little bit in the same theme of legislation and things that have come up and are now affecting the town of Webster. So the ACT legislation is the Advanced Clean Truck legislation, which affects us because what you see there, a whole bunch of trucks. We have 24 full-size trucks right now. They can go out plowing on the road. Technically 6 of them are spares, and there's 18 frontline, but it's a very, very large fleet that will continue to grow with the town in the foreseeable future. So the Advanced Clean Truck Act is New York State legislation mandating that a certain percentage of truck manufacturers' sales be ZEVs, zero emission vehicles. And the truck manufacturers that we buy our large trucks from are primarily large truck manufacturers. They don't have a lot of variation in their product. There's some, but almost all of them are medium to large size trucks, which is what this legislation impacts. The legislation was originally developed in California. It was adopted in New York in 2021, and its first year of implementation is in 2025. The implementation for this program, it sets a requirement of a certain percentage of sales for each manufacturer in the state of New York each year, starting in 2025 and going to 2035. And in 2035, so the first year, the requirement is 11%. So we currently are buying Western Star brand plow trucks that come with the plows, the one-way, that are about $305,000 a piece currently. Western Star is required to sell 11% zero emission vehicles in the state of New York this year in order to continue to sell the diesel trucks that are coming in. So if you break that down into smaller quantities, it would be 11 out of 100 vehicles sold have to be zero emission vehicles. There's quite a few issues with that that we'll kind of get into here a little bit as we move along. Then you see that the requirement by 2035 would be that 75% of the trucks that they sell in New York State would be zero emission vehicles. So where things currently stand with the manufacturers are that they don't have the sales to support this. So there's no major heavy duty truck manufacturer that currently has a zero emission vehicle that to fill enough to sell to fill the orders of the traditional heavy duty. So the diesel trucks that are needed for snow and ice removal can't be sold because there's not enough zero emission vehicle sales. The big part of this is that there's a tech gap. There is not currently a zero emission vehicle that is viable for snow and ice operations as we see it in the state of New York. It does not exist. Because of it's required to run for long hours with minimal breaks, and it has a hydraulic PTO equipment. There was an article that I read probably 6 months ago. It was actually forwarded by Monroe County that talked about New York City doing a trial run with this with their garbage trucks, which they also use to plow with in the winter. The trucks were viable for refuse pickup in the summertime. They run about 12 hours on a charge. When they put them out for snow and ice removal, those same trucks, the same batteries, lasted 2 hours before they had to be recharged. So that's the technology part that isn't there. They're not able to go for the durations that we would need here.
What was the charging time for those? Was it in the article?
It might be in there, but I didn't remember the charging time. And the charging time comes down to your infrastructure.
Right.
Say I have 24 of these. To have 24 high-speed charging stations in a single facility is millions of dollars in infrastructure upgrade just so I can get the power. So that's another major component of this. Yeah. So there's currently not any short-term options. We've heard that some private truck manufacturers may basically go buy trucks in other states or register them in other states to try to work around this and complete the work that they need to do. We have got copies of several letters to the governor and the EPA from the New York State Automobiles Dealers Association, Trucking Association of New York, and American Truck Dealers Group. But Really, we haven't seen any movement to make any concessions or adjustments to this legislation right now. So the impact. Right now, our truck suppliers are telling us we cannot order the trucks that we need for 2025. The 2025 model, if I was to order the same truck that I need, because there's not an alternative, would come through with a title that states it cannot be initially registered in New York State or California. Right now, they currently say California, but it will say it cannot be registered in New York State on the title of the vehicle.
Wow.
So our fleet of over 30 medium and heavy duty trucks, because of that, will essentially continue to age and become more costly to repair. Every year, we still have some trucks that are up 20 years old. We're getting closer. We've made great progress on that in the last few years, working with Paul Adams on the budget, but we still have trucks that are that old, and they start to have bigger and bigger issues, problems. You know, the repairs are 10,000, 20,000 instead of, 800 here or 1,000 there for typical maintenance. And then with the aging of the fleet comes the potential increase for breakdowns and a major snow event, which threatens our ability to serve the public and provide safe roadways. If our trucks are old and don't function properly, we would fall behind and have unsafe roads, which is pretty much our whole goal, is to avoid that at the department. It's the primary function. So things that are kind of being done right now that affect change is a lot of coordination, communicating the negative impacts to our state and local officials, coordinating with other municipalities on strategies. I've already talked with a few different towns, the town of Gates, the town of Barrington, and some of them have already started to reach out in this communication, come up with different strategies. Work with the New York State truck dealers. I know our dealers that we deal with are open to being creative and thinking outside the box in the short term. We just haven't came to any actual action plans yet. Haven't come up with the right combination. Obviously support the automotive and trucking organizations in their efforts to lobby for change. Work with Monroe County and the Highway Superintendents Association to lobby for change, which I'm a member of and we work with. It's a great group. I think we'll continue to start to push on this and work through it. And that's a lot of why I'm presenting this tonight, is to sort of start that movement, start that coordination, start the conversation about this, something about this needing to change in order for municipalities in New York to function. And then at some point, there could be the potential to pass resolutions related to the topic to strengthen the call for change. I don't know what those are yet. I don't have examples, but obviously might be something that is needed in order to solidify the situation and maybe make a change. So with those limitations and being told that we can't order some of the trucks that we had budgeted for and planned on, what I initially have started to do is look for in-stock items. So items that are already delivered now or will be 2024 model year that won't fall into this restriction, and therefore we can purchase them and register them the way we're supposed to. So for this year, I found one piece so far. It's a large piece of equipment, but we think it's going to have a major impact on our ability to do some of the maintenance that we just talked about in the MS4 program, as well as help us with our roadway excavation. There's more and more utilities in our roadways, along our roadways between high-speed fiber optics and things of that nature, that a lot of the excavation we do is hard to do traditionally, and you have to use hydro excavation in a lot of these areas in order to not hit utilities, cable lines, gas lines, all things of that nature that are intertwined with our infrastructure. So we had budgeted, and it's in the preliminary budget, for a new vac truck for the highway department. It'll serve twofold, like I said, drainage, highway. It'll replace our current water truck that we go around and fill up our rollers and mills with water. So we have found one of those that is in stock. And the price for it is a little over $500,000. It's off the Sourcewell contract that allows us to purchase it without a separate bid. And then the plan that we discussed with Paul Adams in Finance is to utilize remaining money for a 6-wheel dump truck that we're trying to order right now for this year, which is right around $314,000. I have to confirm that number with Paul, which is why it says plus or minus. So you utilize that money that we can't order the truck intended for it, and then transfer the balance out of the drainage fund. So we have the special drainage district, which does have its own fund that builds up, So the way we were proposing to purchase this truck that is on the ground that we can take delivery of as soon as we cut the PO is to pay for the little over $500,000 piece of equipment that was scheduled for next week. Do it now, utilize existing budget of $314,000, and then Paul has an organizational way to utilize about $187,000 of the special drainage district fund to pay for the balance of that, to take this truck that we can now, knowing it might be some time before we can order our traditional dump trucks in that portion of the budget. So that is my update on this situation.
So I find it quite ironic where the legislation was originally developed and implemented in California and was adopted in New York 2021 with implementation in 2025. Seems to me that our downstate legislators forgot one thing that they prepared when they adopted this legislation that was initiated in California. It's called snow. So this could have a crushing blow on all municipalities in New York State. So it's good to see that, you know, people are getting together, legislators, because this legislation really is going to have to change.
Yeah, there were some conversations with the town gates that spoke about making an exception.
Right.
And the comment back to that was, this is not an exception. When you have 100% of the municipalities in New York State that are affected, it's not an exception. It needs to be a change in the rule. You know what I mean? That's what you just said, that everywhere in New York State plows snow. California is very limited. You know, so it's a...
I had no idea about this, Pat, so I really appreciate you making this presentation to get the awareness out there.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's really important that people in this state start calling their legislators and saying, you know, you need to take a look at this and reverse it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's going to affect.
There's a phenomenon known in sociology going way back now in my college days. It's called cultural lag, and that's where the material culture outstrips the non-material culture. This is just the opposite. Here you have technology is not available, but you have political impetus to move ahead with programs that are really not realistic or functional. And it's just emphasize what John said. I mean, you have some, would you say it's interesting, it's California, New York, right? Of all the states that are pushing this, when the technology is really not there.
Not for these, you know, I think some of your different uses, buses, over the road things, there's starting to be technology that might be viable for those operations, but not for the municipality operations, which is, you know, it's just a key component of public safety.
No, it's
There's areas that you can make some progress. And the other frustrating part that's in a lot of the documentation I've seen is that these diesel vehicles that we're using are 99% more clean than, you know, 10 years ago. So the technology on the diesel use and the DEF and the different programs like that has come very long ways and is excellent. But it's still, you know, not this doesn't address
Well,
that.
a clean and zero emissions technology is not necessarily the same.
Right. No.
Actually, sadly, it's not.
No, you know,
It's just another step.
I think the board, no, I don't know, maybe they don't. My brother Jeff owns a company called Wise Home Energy. And so they install commercially and residentially cold climate heat pumps, which is, you know, changing everything to electric in your house, you know, or whatever. And, you know, a lot of the things that they do, they get the incentives from New York State, NYSERDA and all that. And so he has a real, he's in the trenches on this thing. And he tells me all the time that there's no way that the grid, there's no plans to get to the grid to the point to handle all this.
Right.
And the story you told about the 2-hour charge when it was cold, he's told me dozens and dozens of stories. He's in the industry. He doesn't have anything against efficient electricity and all that stuff. I think rational people are like, hey, you know what? As time goes on, hey, we should make moves away from fossil fuels and this and that. But we should make moves away from it in a week. because there are things that need to be put into place. And we have a microcosm right here in Webster because, you know, we got Coke Fairlight going in, and Tessie bought all that land and buildings from Xerox. And one of the biggest problems is that RG&E, there's not enough power to handle all that. And they're still somewhat trying to figure out how to get that power to that area of town. Just to power that industry that's going to be in there. So, I don't know, but we know this, you know, and hey, unfortunately, Jenny, John, and myself, we're elected officials. That doesn't mean that we are experts on things. And sometimes, you know, the state assembly and the state, well, ideas have consequences. And it sounds great. And I think everybody would like cleaner energy and this and that. But if you go in and you put it, you vote it in, and now you say you got to have it in 10 years, now you start to, whatever you just said in Latin.
Well, I know, it was English. Cultural lag, right?
Right, how do we get to that point?
But, you know, and this is, and you mentioned this earlier, this is also an unfunded mandate, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it really is.
Sure.
I mean, down the
I
road,
mean-
it's going to be, it's, you know.
Well, it's a perfect example of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
I don't want, if any, we don't have a lot of people in the room tonight, but maybe there's 1 million people watching live, and there'll be 10 million watchers on tape. I can only speak for myself, I'm not gonna speak for the other town board members. I'm not against electric and all of that stuff. What I'm against is not proper planning and foundationally making sure you can get to that point in the years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that you just voted on as a state assembly or whatever. Because that's, to me, it's irresponsible. So you either, like you said, John, you're educated people. Anybody that got elected, they're educated people. Go back, look at these realities, pull it back.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to make the vote, the proposal, whatever, pull it back. And unfortunately, I think we just have such a polar in politics that it's like, oh yeah, because you're a big, you know, coal guy and whatever. No, that's not what we're saying. It's just not going to be ready. I'll get off my soapbox. Jenny, do you have anything on this?
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
I don't know why we always copy California, following the laws there. We're in New York. We're New Yorker.
Ironically, there's, I think, Ford Motor Company and another car manufacturer are actually shutting down their manufacturing of electric vehicles because the sales are just not there anymore. I heard that in the news recently. They're losing tens of millions of dollars.
And also the coals too, we're draining a lot of the batteries.
Yeah.
Right, you can do it in the summer for a certain amount, but then in the winter, you're gonna cut more than just half.
Yeah, between the cold and the
As
equipment,
always, yeah.
the heavy equipment makes it a big draw, so.